Welcome back, everyone, to Ask Sam. We got some interesting questions this time around, and we'll get right into them now. Brian asks on multiple myeloma, is there anything different about multiple myeloma and other blood cancers as it relates to astaxanthin, or is it the mechanism of action the same? Glucose is the Trojan horse to bring in the astaxanthin. There's a couple things. There's an extracellular and an intracellular advantage to astaxanthin. Now, I had the same thing with the polycythemia vera. So multiple myeloma, leukemias, the myeloid type cancers are usually initiated from a stressor, a reactive oxygen species. So radiation can cause that, where it cracks the water molecule into hydroxyl free radicals, and that's called radiation sickness. Chemicals can do it. Stress in your life with the release of epinephrine, norepinephrine, and cortisol can increase your oxidative stress condition. The oxidative stress condition is the cause of these diseases. So, astaxanthin is at the cause level of human disease. So it will donate an electron and neutralize typically the hydroxyl free radical. But when we deal with blood, it can also be related to the peroxyl non-radical and its reaction with iron to form the hydroxyl free radical. But astaxanthin is extremely effective in extracellular reactive oxygen species. So reactive oxygen species that are outside the cell in the bloodstream or in the interstitial areas between cells. So if you are accumulating those, then the astaxanthin will donate an electron to it and neutralize it, convert it into the hydroxyl ion, which then can be extracted typically through the kidneys. So all of these blood type cancers have the same cause. It's just in how they present in people, and every person's different. Some people get multiple myeloma. Some people, like in my case, I got polycythemia vera, which would have over time converted into probably terminal leukemia, but I didn't let it get to that point. I stopped it before it got there. Multiple myeloma is one of those. I'd be sort of curious, Brian, if you were ever in the military. We have a huge number of multiple myeloma cases resulting from exposure to the first Gulf War. A lot of the benzene, naphtha, and hydrocarbons that were initiated from the burning oil wells seem to have a very unhealthy effect on a lot of the soldiers. So, but astaxanthin will work to neutralize the cause of multiple myeloma, and it will stop the further inflammatory response in the bone marrow. So as the stem cells' metabolic rates go up, the production of these hydroxyl free radicals also go up. The generation of free radicals is a result of the metabolism primarily of sugar, glucose, and oxygen in your bloodstream or in the mitochondria, and that reaction generates these free radicals. Now, in normal cells, we can typically handle the free radicals that are generated because we only consume 2 molecules of glucose to get 2 molecules of ATP. So the free radicals are generated in that metabolic process. So the more glucose you take in, the more your mitochondria will convert it into ATP, the more free radicals you're generated. Now, in a normal cell, like I said, 2 molecules of glucose will generate typically 2 molecules of ATP. In cancer cells, it's can be as many as 36 glucose molecules. Cancer is very inefficient. It's anaerobic. So you'll take in 36 molecules of glucose and you only get 2 molecules of ATP. So cancer cells are so ineffective, but they're required to take in large amounts of glucose to survive, and each molecule of glucose can generate as much as 4 free radicals, OHs. So that becomes a pretty serious issue. The higher your metabolic rate, the more inflammatory disease you're probably going to have. So that's why sugar is such an important issue. But the astaxanthin should neutralize that hydroxyl free radical formation from the cancer if the cancer has progressed. We can reach a point in progression where we just cannot get to the point of minimizing the hydroxyl free radical and the oxidative stress that's going to result from that. So we're always better off to prevent disease. It's much more difficult if the disease progression goes very long. And like I've always said, we measure that simply by the high sensitivity C-reactive protein. I hope that helped, Brian. Chadley asks, antineoplastin therapy. Have you heard of Dr. Brzezinski? I have. Can this with Velasta be an end-all, be-all cure, stay cured scenario? Can antineoplastin be electromagnetically charged, introduced, bonded to the Velasta? I'm extremely out of my realm here, but what if the therapy such as this could be coupled with Velasta in an easy pill form? Can we cure cancer by eating a pill and living a life with less fear of losing a loved one? Thoughts? I'm going to start at the bottom. The fact that we are alive means we're going to generate inflammation. We're going to be stressed. We have fear and fright, anxiety. All the emotions generate a reactive or a response. So the fact we're alive simply means that we're going to generate inflammatory markers throughout our body, and eventually the fact we're alive, we're going to die. That's sometimes difficult to understand. To cure cancer, we have to keep the inflammatory disease state down. Now, when you lose a loved one, the epinephrine, the anxiety, the cortisol that's released in that emotion, and that can go on for a while, not just in losing a loved one, but in caring for a loved one. The loss of sleep, anything that causes anxiety in your life is not to your benefit. Each time that you have that feeling, your body secretes either epinephrine, norepinephrine, or cortisol in the fight or flight response to relieve that anxiety. That in itself is inflammatory, and chronic exposure like that will lead to disease. What disease? It depends on the human being. It can be diabetes, it can be Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, dementia, irritable bowel, your stomach gets upset. Now, getting back to Dr. Brzezinski. Dr. Brzezinski's idea was that what he found was the anti-neoplastins that appear to be in our bloodstream seem to be present with cancer. Still, even in his practice, he's still treating the effects, not the cause of these diseases. What we find is that I believe it's p53, which is a genetic marker in our DNA, that if the p53 protein is there, the progression of the cancer seems to stop. The suppression of p53 through oxidative stress, for example, it will stop the production of p53 or misfold that protein so that it's totally ineffective. then cancer becomes extremely progressive. There's not a lot of work that's been scientifically shown on the anto-neoplastin type therapies. I'm not aware of the NIH showing anything definitive as to how this works or why it works. It's probably worth more consideration because some of the success that Dr. Brzezinski has seen would indicate that there may be some sort of an interplay there, but I'm not convinced yet that it's the anti-neoplastins that's doing that. I think it's going to go back to, again, the oxidative stress molecule that's either inhibiting these protein formations. So I'm trying to get back even further than this on the cause of human disease, and it's still pointing me in the direction of Ross. I hope that helped. Sarah asks, DMSO and ulcerative colitis. My daughter, 19 years old, has struggled with ulcerative colitis for several years. She started taking Volasta a few weeks ago. She has more energy and says she wants to continue and see how it helps her. I'm aware that she's still having too many loose stools and she has low iron levels. We need to redo her blood work and see where her inflammation markers are. In the past, I had her on DMSO orally, about a half a teaspoon in the morning and evening, a combination of her not liking smell, taste, and her doctor wasn't familiar with, so that discouraged her and she discontinued using it. I know when she took it, she had more solid BMs. She is currently not on any medication. We have tried so many different supplements over the years. Trying to simplify things for her, I'd like her to take a small dose of DMSO every night before bed, during the week, and off on weekends, and we still want to continue Volasta during mornings and early afternoons. Wanted your thoughts on DMSO and your approach. Thanks so much for sharing your story. Let me tell you a little bit. I'm very familiar with DMSO. I used it in another part of my life as a solvent for making plastics. It's used as a solvent in making a plastic called polysulfone. And that was early on in my life. And one of the things that we could do with DMSO is I could take DMSO in a mint leaf, put it actually in the palm of my hand, and put a drop of DMSO on that mint leaf, and in just a few seconds I could taste the mint. I could actually taste through my hand using DMSO. There is a danger with DMSO, and I personally experienced that. I was contaminated with DMSO and monochlorobenzene. It was a co-solvent polymerization that we were working on, and in the recovery unit I got exposed to those. Well, the DMSO is a universal solvent. It will carry whatever is with it right through your skin and into your system. So DMSO is a very complex product to give to somebody orally. For if there is something in your system, it will readily go right through the lining of your stomach, and the DMSO will carry it in with it. Now, we use DMSO to carry astaxanthin on a salve. So if you have aches and pains, they use this in the equestrian racehorses to carry anti-inflammatories into the horse's joints. They mix it with DMSO, rub it on the joint, it carries it right in. For people, and I've experimented with this myself, for people that cannot orally take aspirin, you can dissolve the aspirin in the DMSO, rub the DMSO on your arm, and the aspirin will show up in your bloodstream. I'm not recommending anyone do this. This is just a basic property of DMSO that's very well understood. I'm not one to recommend oral ingestion of DMSO because you don't know what it's going to carry in with it. It has to be very, very controlled and very well understood. Now, to have your daughter who's working with ulcerative colitis, the Valasta should stop it. The fact that she has a low iron level would also indicate to me she's not eating enough red meat, preferably beef or liver. And if she eats more beef, her bowel movements should begin to solidify. The iron absorption should improve with her taking Valasta. I notice you don't mention how much she's taking here. I don't believe. No, you don't. So I would up the dose until her ulcerative colitis goes away, her bowel movements improve, and then you could back off until you hit the critical point based on her stress level in her life. Everyone's dose is different. There is no panacea. One single dose works for one person, and another person taking the same dose would see the same effect. So what we do is we treat to the degree of stress level, and then we find the normal for that person. Karina asks, NADH. This is probably one of the most interesting molecules in the human body. Could you let me know how much I should take of your product with PD? It depends. You're going to have to call the nurse on that one. I don't know enough about your, let's see, my actual weight is 41.5 kilograms. So it's going to be, it's not very much. Not weigh very much, but I have a left leg that weighs more than you do. But at that point, you're looking at probably 60 milligrams of Valasta a day. The 20 milligrams of NADH, it appears that that's what you're taking, should be adequate. Sublingual is better. You don't want the HCl in the stomach to denigrate or degrade it. Let's see. It will work on Parkinson's disease, and the hydroxy dopamine appears to be a pretty serious component of it. Let's see. This is pretty interesting. It says here, a friend of mine sent me the video with your interview informing us that PD patients do actually have enough dopamine, but the neurotoxic hydroxydopamine 3. This information really hit me since one of my medical MD electrofrequency confirmed to me that I don't have Parkinson's. According to him, I have enough dopamine, but the receptors are frequently used by active viruses or bacteria. Yet my very bad physical condition in 2017 got much better when I started to take Matopar in 2018. Could that be possible to develop something in order to destroy or heal the hydroxydopamine for PD? That questionnaire takes time, but you have to stop. There's a basic equation in engineering called in minus out equals accumulation. What Valasta does, we work on the two components of the left side of that equation, the in minus out. So in is the rate of generation of the hydroxyl free radical minus the rate at which we can get rid of it. And that equals accumulation. The accumulation part of that term on the right side of the equation is what causes disease. So we want to reduce the inventory of hydroxyl free radical or any other reactive oxygen species. So we want to eliminate the generation of it in either diet, stress level, not exposing yourself to chemicals, whatever it takes to reduce your exposure to those reactive oxygen species. And then the velasta is the minus the rate at which we take it out. The velasta increases the rate at which it's disposed. And that's what brings down the inventory. Now, we can go through life, and when we're young, we're bringing in free radicals, but we have glutathione, NADH, for example. We have SOD, which is superoxide dismutase. These are all things that will neutralize or take out the hydroxyl free radical, hopefully equivalent to the rate at which we're generating them, so we don't get a net inventory of them. As we get older, our SOD production goes down, our glutathione levels decrease dramatically, but our habits that we use to generate the free radicals never changes. We still eat the same thing, maybe more of it. We stay up late, we drink beer, we drink alcohol, we smoke cigarettes, and these are just now adding. So the inventory on the right side of the equation gets larger and larger until finally you will present with a disease. That disease is not predictable. Every person presents differently. But and it depends on the random mutation, typically of the DNA for cancer. So when we look at NADH, there is some evidence out there that oral ingestion of NADH can have a positive effect. There's still a number of steps in between just taking a pill and eliminating a disease. For example, the citric acid cycle, there's several of them. There's GLUT4, GLUT1, GLUT2, GLUT3, GLUT4, sugar metabolism. There can be as many as 30 steps before you complete that cycle. If any one of those steps is missing, then you've just shut down that pathway, and now your body's going to try to find another equilibrium or a homeostasis to operate under to keep you within the life envelope. If your body cannot adjust within that life envelope, you die. So, but NADH is pretty important. I would probably defer to the NIH on that. I know there's been a lot of research on it, very positive type research. But the other one that I've seen before is NADH and CoQ enzymes. Seems to have a synergistic effect also. So here is, if you just search NIH and NADH, you'll pull up some of the most recent research that's been done on this. Years ago, I had looked at it because the NAD and the conversion of NAD to NADH and NADPH, the NADH is a way of moving electrons in a biological condition. So inside a cell, you do not want electrons moving at the speed of light. So we use these proteins to absorb an electron and kinetically or physically transport it much slower so that we don't lose those electrons because of the momentum of their charge and the rate at which they move. So we slow them down. And NADH, and there's some other, your cell membranes, for example, will slow the movement of these electrons and allow proteins to capture them that need them for all of these chemical reactions. And with that, I'm going to close. I think that's all the questions I have on this series. And keep the questions coming in, and we'll do the next one. Thank you.
Tell me that you're ready to go. Tell me that you're